Hey guys, it's Agils Maynard here. Got another episode today on the Forester XT. In our previous episode, you guys saw I got the taillights squared away. We got a bumper cover on now. Just looking like a real car for once. So that's really nice. This episode, we're going to get back to those fuel lines that I talked about however many episodes ago that was now. And I got the space underneath painted where those are going so that I can actually get lines through there and not worry about being in my own way. So let's dive under the car right now and take a look at what's been going on. So if we dive down underneath the car, we can see I've actually gotten a few things done ahead of time. Namely, you can already see parking brake cables, an ABS sensor, fuel tank wiring harness. And then down in here, ooh, I hit the brake caliper there. Since I got the track taken care of for where all the lines are running, I've now got the brake lines in permanently. So those are all secured via pin clips strategically to keep the lines from vibrating. And I've also started on my fuel lines. You can see over there is my evap line. I've got this figured out to the tank side, but seeing how it came into the engine compartment area, not 100% set with that, so that's going to have to change a little bit, I think. And the other thing I got to do is take this line and form up some stainless lines to run alongside it and make sure everything nests into my line bundle that's going underneath here nice and tidy. I also have my gas tank almost ready to go back in. I'm only holding off on this to make sure I have access to the lines as I'm putting stuff in, so hopefully that will be to my advantage, but it's just on a dolly here, so if I need to push it into where I'm working, I can, so that's nice. But yeah, let's go get some lines formed, and maybe then we can get the gas tank in. So underneath here, in the interim, I've managed to get my stainless steel line kind of formed up, and I'm pretty happy with how it's coming out. Scoot on over. So I made this tail super long because I don't really know where it's meeting up with the fuel tank quite yet. I think it's somewhere, you can see the blue tape around the evap line. I think it's going to be somewhere around there, but that also kind of coincides with where that ABS line is, so I don't know if I need to do some final tweaking. It kind of depends on where the fuel tank lines up with stuff, and I'll figure that out soon-ish. And then this I kind of bent up and went all the way up to the front. So this is that same stainless line that we were just looking at under the car, except now on the bench. Then right next to it is just a raw piece that's actually longer than how long I need it. So let's throw the dies back in the vise, these two guys here, and then I'll show you guys kind of how I transfer this to a blank piece. there seems to be some plumbing running through here, if I had to guess. I've got these running. The evap's the one that seems to want to kind of just wiggle around the most. But you can see both fuel lines now kind of run out. And this is all in the general area of the fuel tank here. So once I figure out where everything's lining up there, I can get that sorted. But otherwise, this is looking pretty good. And it does look like they're drooping low compared to where I have that cover panel. But in reality, most of it's just kind of hanging low. And if I actually push up on this stuff, it all sits in there pretty well. So I'm going to do some zip tie magic and all sorts of other stuff to keep these all contained and keep them from rattling around too much and rubbing against each other. And other than that, yeah, I can start to figure out AN lines to the fuel tank. And then we are so much closer to having gas on the motor. So before I tuck away this guy for good, let's take a quick look at what's going on here on the fuel tank. The astute amongst you may notice these aren't stock fittings here. These here are the fuel pressure and return lines coming off of the fuel pump here. Stock, these are 5/16 hard lines coming off of the tank here. And they have receiving lips on them just for your standard quick connect fuel fitting here. And this isn't the problem. That is, because, you know, that's the old fuel line that I had shown way back when, and part of the reason this whole thing ended up in the shop in the first place. So rather than using this stuff, just the stock lines, I've opted to go AN lines from the tank to the stainless lines running under the car. And the reasoning being is that it's more difficult to find a way to hook up the stainless lines to these quick disconnects. And I already am getting AN fittings for up front, so I might as well get them for back here as well. Because this is just 5/16 tube, I just took one of the tube flare nuts and secured it on the end here, and you can actually still see the little ridge in it that the quick disconnect grabs on, but there's still like most of the length of this nut of tube going in here. And then this is exposed because I got to get the AN line on it. It's actually, you know, one of these hose fittings here. Those will go off to the stock location, and those will go up into the body. The evap line runs parallel to all of that, so that's good. And that'll kind of tie into all of that. The only thing I'm worried about is because of the length of my tube nut here, I'm sticking way out, and this fitting's really far out. But what I could always do is I could always cut this line right where it is and push the tube nut in a little bit further if this needs to go back ever so slightly, because it's hard to kind of see here, but you can kind of imagine how the body goes, and I'm not sure if this is going to contact the sheet metal under the rear seat or not. So that's going to require a little bit of fit checks before I slap that on home. I've got this hose now attached to the fuel tank, and again, I'm using my strategic zip tie locations just to keep this relatively secured to the lines that I have on the tank. So it's still got a little bit of flex here, which I actually kind of like, because these two lines here are going up to the stainless lines on the body. So I need that little bit of play in this for when the tank comes up and down, because otherwise it's going to be almost impossible to unthread these guys while it's under the car and the tank's all the way up there. So I did also make note here of the different directions, and right now I just put a piece of tape saying supply, and then for my return I just have green zip ties. Probably what I'll do is I'll have blue zip ties for supply and green zip ties for return. That way I can just take a quick look and I'll know which one each line is, and I'm going to try to keep that consistent throughout, just so that I know which hose is which, because otherwise I'm going to get confused somewhere around here and it's not going to end well. Okay, so I have the fuel tank kind of mocked up in place. All I did was take my little 3 amp power supply here, set it to 12 volt, and then I hooked up my leads on the connector here. Let's see if I can get a good angle on this connector. And I consulted the wiring diagrams here. I wasn't able to find them in the Haynes service manual, but I went online and found that someone had posted the service manual diagrams online. Thank you. I love when people post those online on forums and stuff so that I can use those as reference material. And I was able to determine that on my connector here, the two wire colors I was looking for are black, yellow, and black. And black yellow is 12 volt plus, black is just ground. So I hooked up my power supply that way. And now, if we go over to my AN lines, so if we go to the other side of the tank, I've got, this is my supply braided hose. This is the return braided hose. So I'm just going to put this over the fuel tank just for a second. This is just a fuel jug I have set up to catch the fuel. And then if I press, I get the light. You can hear the pumps running. I can hear fluid going. And obviously the return is not doing anything right now. And that's spitting out fuel. So that's perfect. And the other thing is up top. You check these guys. And I'm not seeing any leaks on the supply side. So that looks good to me as well. So I've now run a piece of AN hose going down to my two stainless lines below. So what this is actually doing for the time being is it's just creating a loop so that the fuel supply comes and goes right back to the return. I checked, and this hose is roughly the length I need to run it to about here or maybe even over here. Gives me some flexibility for my options. That's going to be the supply line going to the intake manifold itself. So I'm not wasting the hose. If we go underneath, this is that same area down below. So these are those two fittings. That's that hose that we saw. That's just the loop. Green zip ties for return. So these lines go all the way back. And end up back here. So again, return. I have to figure out what color I want to make the supply, but I'm just noting the returns for now. And then these two hoses come off, and this one is the one that we saw earlier. And this one here is actually just a spare piece of hose that I made up real quick. And I'm going to run that straight to a gas tank so I can purge out the lines real quick before reconnecting it to the system and testing all of the supply and return. All right, so I've taken the return now that I've flushed it out, and I've checked some of the fittings here. Of course, some of them were leaking on the first attempt. That's usually how these things go. But now it's all hooked up back to the return. So this is a closed loop system. And if I turn this on, we can hear the fuel circulating through the system. We check each of our fittings. That one's not dripping. Then we come up to the ones up front. And we see these guys are not dripping either. So the fuel is running through my fuel lines. There's no leaks or anything in the system. I've also checked these two up top. These don't seem to be leaking either. So that means that I have a working fuel system, at least, you know, supply. Okay, so this was the problem that I was worried about earlier. Where my nice AN fitting right there, yeah, it's hitting this rear seat stud. That fella right there. And, yeah. God damn it, never survives first contact with the enemy, am I right? 2 seconds with the cold chisel and I peel back the cover here, and it's literally just a nut on the body. Like, not doing anything, it's just there and it's being annoying. So, guess where that's going? Off the car. Okay, so now that that's not a problem anymore, let's get the gas tank in. So where we last left off here, I was struggling getting the fuel tank in because I was running into some interference issues up where the gas tank meets the steel of the back seat. So I kind of had to assess what was going on, and really the issue was that my fittings here that were connecting the AN hose that you see down in there to the fuel pressure side, this one here, is this long little series of adapters. So it's protruding way out and it was just hitting the metal here. So what I've discovered looking through catalogs of various AN fittings and everything is that there's actually these unique kind of fittings. Let's see here, there you can kind of see on the light where it's got this little ring that actually receives to the quick disconnects that are stock on the tank. So these are little, these little SAE to -6 male flare, and they're actually really cool because if you look down inside you can see it's got double O-rings and all that kind of stuff. And then this is the nut. So this nut you would just slide over one of your fittings like that, and then you take the tube end, and oh, I can already feel the O-rings are engaging with the material, so you kind of got to force that on there, and then this screws onto that nut, and then you have a shorter connector than this whole stuff, because bear in mind that this tube nut had to sit at the little step, whereas this, as you can see, sits much further up. So when you compare the two of them, so this is the location where that bump out is, so that I have to put the other tube right about level at that, and you can see it's almost the entire width of the threads up here at the top that it's going to pull it in. So I'm hoping that's going to be enough to give me a fighting chance to actually getting the gas tank in. And seeing how far off I was from the positions with the holes, it didn't seem like I was too far off, so I think something like this is going to be perfect. Hallelujah, the gas tank is in. That took a lot of effort, but I'm so glad to see that's finally in. All those bolts I just sent home with a little impact gun. Nothing crazy. I might look up the actual torques back on them and just make sure, but they were pretty damn snug with the gun, and I don't want to go too hard to break them. So, there's actually clearance up top for stuff too. So this is up top. Like I was saying, there's clearance for everything. I actually routed that wire up and above so it wasn't chafing on the braided stainless line, because that could eat through the wire. And then I'm going to have a bad time. So there's about quarter inch maybe of clearance up at the front. But you know, clearance is clearance. So I'm so glad to see that that all worked out. And I've even got things like the fill neck now connected. So this is pretty much a functioning fuel system back here, which is fucking awesome, because this means I can now move up front. But that's definitely going to do it for this episode. This has been a shit ton of work to get it to this point, and a bit frustrating, but I'm glad I stuck with it to get to this point, because thank God it's on. So yeah, all the usuals, guys. Like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. Any engagement here really helps the channel grow, as you guys know. And yeah, so our next episode we'll actually start working on the motor. We'll get our parallel fuel system set up front. Then all the fuel system will be done, and I can finally move on to wrapping up this job. So, I guess I'll catch you guys all next time.